Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Oh, good. Okay. I already had one meltdown this morning. I didn't want to have another one. I dropped the mouse this morning and I couldn't find the top, so I switched mouse and then my earbuds didn't work and I couldn't hear anything. I just started crying. I hate this computer. I hate this. I want my old computer back. So, let me start over. Hi, my name's Debbie. Welcome to my channel. Hey Judy, hey Jennifer, hey Marty. I'm so glad you guys are here. So I'm getting, yeah, Ivy Cam. That is the software that makes my iPad a webcam. And I'm supposed to get the tripod for the iPad today. I ordered it yesterday from, I also ordered a, it's a phone stabilizer. So you put your phone in it and it's got a handle so you can hold it like that to keep your phone steady. Hey Nichelle, I bought a gimbal, and what a gimbal does, if you don't know, because I didn't know when I first heard of a gimbal. I was like, what the heck is a gimbal? It it makes your phone kind of float. So like if you're filming something and it's there's a lot of movement, the phone just kind of it stays steady while you're if you move like this, like if it's like for instance, if you were on a ride or something, and like, well, for instance, when if Travis ever gets his side by side and we go off-roading, if I had a gimbal, I could hold it and we could be bouncing all over the place and the phone would stay even because it would like actually the phone doesn't float. This part floats and then it makes the phone stay steady. And it's a pain because it has to be stay charged up for it to work. And so one of my friends told me, you don't need a gimbal, you only need a phone stabilizer. And the gimbals, they can go up to like in the hundreds of dollars. And this stabilizer is like 17 bucks. And she said it works just as good. So I figured I'd try that first. And it also, while it has the handle, it also has little feet that pop out from the handle to make it a tripod. So so then I'll have a tripod for the phone and a tripod for the iPad, and I'm going to see which works better. And then I might keep them both, or I might send one back. I don't know. I'm in tech experiment phase right now. And you guys get to be my guinea pigs. Isn't that fun? Judy has, I think, probably. Did anybody else come in? It's National Tech Challenge Day, where all our tech challenges are set. I think Judy has put in the most fun trivia that we've ever had. It's about Judge Highland, and I love it. Law was far from Highland's mind while growing up, the youngest of eight. Wow! In Monroe, Wisconsin. Since the fifth grade, music is what made Judge Highland happy. He took up the trombone because he thought it was an impressive instrument and his arms were long enough. His first job was as the general music teacher in a grade school in Rockford, Illinois. He then returned to Wisconsin to teach music at his old high school. He taught another 3 years before entering law school. That is so cool. I wonder what made. Yes, he is. I wonder what made him decide to go to law school. That's interesting. I've always wondered about people that change careers. Like, what was the reason? Was it just that they hated the job they had and wanted a different one? Or did something happen that made them want to take their career in a different direction? That's interesting. I love stuff like that. That's fascinating to me. That is so cool. Okay, so yesterday we got started with closing arguments, but I was dealing with adult crap. I forgot about that. Well, that was disturbing, though. That was more disturbing. This is fun. Music is fun. Bill Spector in a Batman costume is disturbing. You see how quickly I put that out of my mind? Okay, so we had started closing arguments, but I was distracted and it was just a small little snippet. So we're gonna start over with closing. Oh, well, it would help if I would share my screen. Yes, Spectre is disturbing. Everything about Spectre is disturbing.
Good morning. I always start my closing arguments in the same way. And it's simply this. If any of the attorneys, either throughout the trial or during closings today, from either side, myself, Mr. Brown, or the defense, misstate a fact or evidence, you should go with your collective memories. You guys are the jury. We've sat with this case for months, had meetings about it, talked about it, read things about it, and sometimes, not intentionally, but sometimes people, misremember something or think of one thing they read. So please use your collective memories as
They should
jurors
remember
to
better than
determine
anybody.
what you heard and what you saw. Additionally, it should be the written law that the judge just read and that you will get a copy of that should determine how you process and think of the law. For years, I've listened to attorneys where prosecutors have basically belittled the burden of proof and where the defense has built it up to be something that can never be overcome or could only be overcome by video. Neither of those things are true. You should look at the written law and follow the written law. Second thing I want to say is I want to apologize for all the graphic photos that you folks had to look at the last 3 weeks. I'm sorry I had to show them to you, but we had to. They were part of a crime, and because of the charges and what we have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, it was necessary for you to look at some of those photos. I will promise, though, today I will not be showing you those anymore. There will be none of those photos in my closing. So every case that comes in is kind of like a puzzle. You have to look at it because obviously you weren't there. But, solving a case and thinking about whether or not a person is guilty or not guilty is like putting together a puzzle. And it's your job as the jury to put that puzzle together. But the question in this case, or why this case is kind of unique, is the person who committed the crime had 8 days to spread the pieces of that puzzle all over the state of Wisconsin, or at least southern Wisconsin. Now, what are the pieces of those puzzle? They're evidence. What is evidence? It's what you saw in this courtroom and what you heard in this courtroom, testimony. People sitting on the witness stand and telling you what they knew. Before we start off going through that evidence, I want to remind you of the background of the events before July 1st of 2021. In June of 2021, Bart and Krista Halderson lived at 4595 Oak Springs Circle with their son, Chandler Halderson. And at that time in June, they thought that their son had an internship with American Family. Although there was problems with the payment, he hadn't been working there about 6-7 months, hadn't been paid yet. They thought their son was attending MATC, that he had already earned a solar certificate there, and that he was enrolled in the IT program and was one class away from graduating. They also thought that he was going to soon be going to a job in Titusville, Florida at SpaceX. Now, things became a little suspicious to the father, Bart Halderson, who's an accountant. He's wondering, why is a Fortune 500 company not paying my son when he's working there? And for over a year, he was talking to various people at Madison College or MATC about why he hadn't gotten his son's transcripts, why they couldn't get a meeting, why he hadn't received a solar certificate. He had been emailing with these three people, Aaron Hoover, Daniel Spieth, and Alyssa Brandt, and been communicating with them. This all kind of comes to a crescendo or to a head the day before Bart is murdered. And on that day, he has a phone call with Omar Job. He starts off this phone call, you can just tell in his voice, he's angry, because he thinks this college has been giving him and his son the runaround for about a year. They're not doing their job. And so he's kind of aggressive at the beginning of this call. You don't really like him until you know the whole story. And he learns during this call that his son has never earned a solar certificate, that his son is not enrolled in the IT program, that his son owes the college over $1,000, and that Alyssa Brandt, Aaron Hoover, and Daniel Spieth have never worked for Madison College. We see, and that is the background that lead us into the events of July 1st, 2021. On that day is started by Chandler messaging his girlfriend. 7:26 a.m., I hardly slept. 7:27 a.m., I don't know, stuff really hasn't been going well for me lately, so I'm trying to plan for the next thing to fuck me over. We know at 7:27 a.m., his mom leaves for work. She works customer service at Zimbrick. She heads to work. We then know at 7:51 a.m., Chandler messages his girlfriend, yeah, I had a great future planned and it's falling apart. Now, what does he know at this point? His dad does send him a text message the day before saying, I spoke to Omar Job. I honestly don't know if that meant anything to Chandler or not, but things are coming to a crescendo. And what we do know is he texts his girlfriend at 1:04 p.m. I overheard that they may go to the cabin with their friends.
That's so cool.
But I don't know. We also know that on Bart's work calendar, he has a meeting with Chandler and MATC. I don't know if Bart confronted him the night before. I don't know if Bart was going to see how long this ruse or how elaborate this ruse was going to get. But this topic was going to be discussed, and there would be a coming to terms. We know that at 2:10 p.m., Bart texts Chandler, I'm ready whenever you are. What happened next? Well, we have to look at the evidence. There's a spent shell casing in the basement of the home. There's a bullet fragment, noticeable reddish brown staining, also tests positive for Bart's DNA. That's the bullet that went through and through Bart. the spent casing, and that casing tested positive as being shot from the rifle that belonged to Chandler. We know that Chandler got this rifle about 2 weeks prior, and it was found in the barn on Irwin Road. We know that he got it from his friend Smith, and he was given a bunch of ammo. We also see evidence in the basement of a divot from ricochet, a fresh divot. Also, blood. A quadrillion times more likely to be Bart than any other unknown person. More blood. And we know that Chandler texted his mom this. Dad's phone died. Text or call me. Remember, Dad's phone had a charger right there on the desk. You can plug your phone in and within 10 seconds send a text message. I think here there's a half-truth. Dad's dead. Dad died. Oh, and get me soda on your way home. I have an extra hour of work. We know Chandler didn't have a job. He's stalling. Get his mom to take more time. Okay, I can, she says, smiley face. We know that she returns to the house at 5:12 p.m. We also know that her blood is found in the basement as well. And at 5:11 p.m., Chandler starts writing the following note. Weekend chores, H2O2 and lemon. So that's hydrogen peroxide, which cleans up blood, and lemon, which is a deodorizer. Door handles, move your shit upstairs, get a job. Interesting, if he would have just gotten a job, he wouldn't have had to do the prior 3. And clean the floor. That came back in a search warrant for his Google account. We also know at 7:49 p.m. he's in the shower FaceTiming his girlfriend. So he cleans up. He then departs at 8:16 that night for Quit Trip. We see him there at the Quit Trip. There's the Volvo. There he is. He buys 20 pounds of ice. He arrives back home at 8:29 p.m. Then we know that somewhere between 8:30 and 9:30, the neighbor, Steve Greiber, smells a weird burning, a pungent burning that he describes like a pig roast. And you heard testimony from Fire Inspector Bill Boswell that unfortunately in his line of work, he's come across many burned bodies, human bodies, and that they do in fact smell like a pig roast. Moving on to Friday, July 2nd. We know throughout that night, and I'm not re-showing this video, but there's hours of this video. We know that we see burning in the fireplace and the garage light go on and off. All throughout the night. There it is, almost 3 a.m. Until at one point it kind of crescendos and dies down. We also know, looking at the living room of the Halderson home, that right there by the fireplace is a measuring tape. Folks, he measured the parts of the body to see if they were small enough to fit into the fireplace. And a fan, add oxygen to that fire, make it burn a little bit hotter. We know that it burned hot enough that it damaged the fireplace. The door shattered, and the paint is visibly peeling and bubbling. We also know that there's blood evidence. Evidence of cleanup from the luminol photos, as well as droplets of blood. We know that blood test, that those stains test positive for blood, and that they test positive for Bart and Krista's DNA. There is also some DNA from Chandler. He did cut his foot. We're not disputing that. But he cut his foot in the process of dismembering and blowing and burning his parents, not from playing ball with the dogs. More blood. That's also Dad. And of course, on top of this fireplace that then is made to look all pristine with papers that date to June 23rd, not in the winter from when you would have last actually had a real fire, but from June 23rd, there's a piece of skull. And so Dr. Cristina Figueroa Soto gets involved in this case. And she finds bones. She finds lots of bones. They go into this ash trap. I had never even heard of an ash trap before. Clearly, neither had Mr. Halderson. But they find a total of 230 bone fragments. She's able to say 106 of them were substantial enough that she's able to say what they were, that they were human and what parts of the body they're from. 53 from the skull or cranium, 18 from the hands, 24 teeth, 8 vertebrae, 3 long bones, either from arms or legs. There's also evidence in the garage. We have blood staining on shoes. That blood staining tests positive for both Bart and Krista and is identified as blood, not just touch DNA. More staining on the shoes, Bart. And in the shoes, they test the inside of the shoes as well to see whose shoes these belong to. They're Chandler's. They're his size 10 and a half. Oh, and he's wearing them right there. Those are the shoes he wore. In the garage, there's an axe found. And there's blood staining on this axe. It's positive for human blood on the hilt. It's positive for human blood on the head. On the head of the axe is both Bart and Krista's DNA. On the hilt is both Bart and Krista's DNA. And look at those numbers. A quadrillion times more likely to be those two than an unknown person. That's 1,000 times the world's population. And on the handle, Bart and Krista's DNA as well. We know at 7:02 a.m. that morning, that's a Friday morning of a holiday weekend, okay? July 3rd, Friday morning, a 23-year-old at 7:02 a.m. gets up, drives to Fleet Farm. Again, wearing those shoes. He buys a tarp. There's that tarp, 6x8. That tarp is later found in a trash bin at the Irwin Road property out in the woods. He returns home at 7:31. And we see the following, throughout the day, we see the following text messages between him and his girlfriend. We're set for this. We just need ice. And now hydrogen peroxide, because I stepped on glass. Later, there's more talk, whether she will come or not. But if your mom has an extra bottle, that'd be great. And a Swiffer wet jet. Okay, I do and there's more talk about whether or not Kat will be there and what time. And Chandler responds, okay, I do kind of need the Swiffer and the peroxide and stuff. Oh, and remember ice. Didn't he just buy 20 pounds of ice less than 12 hours earlier? But he needs more ice. What does he need that ice for? Well, the fireplace broke. We know there's a freezer. He bought lots of ice, and that freezer tested positive for human blood. Parts of his mom and his dad were put in that freezer. We know that night on the 2nd, one of Krista's coworkers, Daniel Croninger, came to the house. He had heard that day that Krista no-called and no-showed for work, and that is not the Krista he knew. She had worked there for several years, had never done that before, just not the type of person she was. I mean, of course, I never met her, but she seems a little type A. Like she liked things to be in order, liked things to be a certain way, and was responsible. So he comes over, and Chandler begins to tell the tale of, yeah, they went up to the cabin. They left this morning with some mystery couple. You know, she probably just forgot to take off, even though her boss testified that she would often take off a year in advance. and get the dates right, and had dates planned out in the future. But Daniel seems to be somewhat satisfied with that. Here's the problem. Krista's phone is responding to towers in her house. She didn't go anywhere. She never left that house. There are cameras on every side of that house. We know when Krista went in, and we never see her leave. This is not a whodunit, folks. That house is surrounded by cameras. We know who came and left. And we know that her phone was found in a shoe, hidden under a shelf, behind other shoes, wrapped in tinfoil, wrapped in a paper towel. Dan leaves about 10 minutes later after talking with Chandler, and Kat arrives and spends the night. And they spend the night on this couch fort. You probably thought, why are they putting in evidence about that? Who cares where they slept? This is why it's important. A normal bed, a queen size, is about 5 feet wide. 2 people can sleep there really comfortably and, for the most part, not disturb one another unless you're a rather light sleeper. But Chandler has a problem. He has body parts in the basement of his home, in the freezer. What if Kat gets a hankering for some ice cream and goes in there like she had before? He needs to be able to control her that night. He needs to be able to know if she wakes up and where she goes if she does. So he builds this, a thing that has walls where you really can't get in and out of it gracefully. It's his way to know where she's at. I'm not sure if his girlfriend realizes how lucky she actually is. Saturday, July 3rd, 2021. Kat leaves at 6:55 a.m. She has a job. And we know at 7:47 a.m., Chandler is once again up and leaving the house, headed for Roxbury. How do we know that he's headed for Roxbury? His Snapchat shows him there. Kat kind of keeps track of Chandler's location, and they snap each other all the time. She finds him there. His phone also puts him there. And he's quite close to where the remains were found. We also know that is an area he frequented. That's a picture of him about a year before, standing there with a knife. And that white tent in the background, that's where they found Mom's legs. Dr. Rogalska performed the autopsy of the legs. And there's only certain things she can tell us from the limited amount of human body remaining that she was able to do an autopsy of. She can say that Krista Halderson was dismembered post-mortem, so after death. She also, looking at a totality of the circumstances, puts the cause of death as homicidal violence. Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot tell you if Krista was shot, strangled, stabbed, or something else. I can't. What I can tell you is we have 5 bullets missing from a magazine, and we know that Bart Halderson was shot 2 or 3 times. So there are 2 missing bullets, but I don't know if she was shot. What I do know is she entered the house, and it was only Bart and Chandler there. No one else. She died of homicidal violence. Manner of death, homicide. And those are legal documents that the ME has to put these determinations on. We know that Chandler arrives back home at 9:31 a.m. Later that day, he goes to Dulce's house, and he returns at 3:07 p.m. And that night, though, we know he leaves his house at 10:08 p.m. And we know he goes up to Portage along the Wisconsin River. From his house to Portage and back. He's up in the Portage area from at least 10:37 p.m. to 11:03 p.m. Portage is along the Wisconsin River. We tried to search that area. Wisconsin River has a very strong current. People drown there every year. We never find their bodies, and their bodies are whole. They attempted a dive. It was unsafe. We didn't find any evidence there. But I think in the totality of the circumstances, that wasn't a nighttime trip to go swimming. We know he returns at 11:30 p.m. And then we go on to July 4th. July 4th is actually the day that is the most eerie to me, because it's like Chandler Halderson pushed pause on his crime and just lived a normal life for a day. On July 4th, he spends the day with his girlfriend and his girlfriend's family. He goes to the farm, uses the pool, eats dinner, they have some sort of barbecue, and he asks permission to return the next day and use the pool. On that day, he does do one thing concerning his crime. Oh, and then he goes to fireworks that night at Dan Croninger's house. He does send this text message that he says tells everyone is from his mom. And it is made from mom's phone that, again, is in the house, in shoes, hiding in the garage. Made it safely. Can't get anything through. And yes, it's packed. Going to White Lake today for the parade. We'll be home Monday night or Tuesday early. Love you lots. Mom ended a lot of her text messages to Chandler. Love you lots. Couple problems with the text message. First, the parade was on Saturday, not Sunday. Second, the phone never leaves Windsor, Wisconsin. Monday, July 5th. We know that Kat had stayed over the night before, and she leaves at 7:47. We know that that day is supposedly Chandler's big doctor appointment at 2 p.m. We know that it's at a UW clinic on Park Street because there's conversation between Kat and Chandler about her potentially taking him, trying to get off of work, and she actually Googles the directions. Here's his text messages to her. Made it a bit ago and checked in. This is at 2:09. Just need you to know because I have horrible reception. 2:22. No connection to even load Snapchat. 2:24. And no Wi-Fi. 2:24. What UW clinic doesn't have Wi-Fi? They took an X-ray and CT scan. Nothing bad on the X-ray. CT scan, hun. They haven't determined anything, but with my legs, like they were, and I gotta wait to hear what they determined. Chandler never went to any doctor's appointment. He's at home, sending these text messages to his girlfriend, keeping up his ruse. Nowhere close to Madison, certainly not on Park Street. He does leave the house, though, that day. At 4:30 p.m., he goes to the farm. We know about that. He leaves a voicemail for Cress, and then him and Cress end up having an interaction, and there's this whole conversation about using the pool. We also hear from both Cress and Dulce that they went by the pool, and there was no Chandler. So they take their little lawnmower. What did Dulce say? Granny's on a lawnmower. And they ride to where his car is. And the back is up, the trunk door, the hatch. And no Chandler. It's by the wood line. They see Chandler at some point kind of exit from the wood line. And indeed, his phone does have him there. And Cress is concerned enough. She thinks something's happening. I don't think she thought this, but she thought something was happening. So she asks the deputies to come take a look out in the woods there. So Brent Baverstock comes. He sees turkey vultures. He knows what he's about to find. He probably thinks he's going to find a whole body, but he knows what he's about to find. And there was Bart Halderson's torso. Dr. Breslauer did the autopsy of Bart's torso. She said he had at least 2 gunshot wounds, possibly 3. She couldn't tell because some of the deterioration of the muscle, whether or not it was like 1 wound tract or 2. So at least 2, but maybe 3. That he was shot in the back at least twice. That there was bullet material located in his body, and that 1 shot was a contact wound. The muzzle of the gun was touching his skin on the back. This wasn't a, oops, the gun went off. This is a, got you. You're dead. Cause of death, gunshot wounds. Manner of death, homicide. Can't shoot yourself in the back. So deputies begin to search this property. It's a vast property, maybe about 45 acres. A lot of it's prairie, a lot of it's woods. But they find this oil drum that has this weird cutout. And so they look in there and they find tools. And those tools then are tested by the Wisconsin State Crime Lab. The all-way handsaw has human blood identified as Bart and Krista. The broken saw blade has blood. It's Bart's. The scissors has blood, Bart and Krista's. And again, look at those numbers, 1,000 times the world's population. There's also some pruning shears. Again, tested positive for human blood, Bart and Krista. And the head had Bart. Some of these tools were then sent to Dr. Figueroa Soto. And she did a detailed analysis, and she sat and she talked a lot about, well, things I don't really understand. But here's the basics of what I understood and what her reports say. Is that this all-way saw has a certain number of teeth per inch. This broken handsaw has a certain number of teeth per inch. She can look microscopically at the wounds and tell us what tools are consistent with the markings that she saw. On Bart Halderson, his 4th cervical vertebrae is consistent with the broken handsaw. That's the tool that Chandler used to cut off his dad's head. And of course, that handsaw, or that blade, has DNA parts. Tools used to dismember Bart Halderson: the right humerus, consistent with that all-way super saw, right femur, consistent with the all-way super saw, and left femur, consistent with the all-way super saw. That's that saw. Again, has Bart's DNA and blood. Analyst McMahon from the Wisconsin State Crime Lab also looked at some of these items found on the Irwin Road farm. She looked at that saw blade and she compared it to the saw handle found in the garage of the Halderson home. And she did what she does. She took some measurements, puts things precisely, and found that they were a match, that those items fit. She put together 2 puzzle pieces. An item from Irwin Road matched an item in the garage of the Halderson home. She also took a look at the tarp in the garbage can. And there's a couple links back to the house with this garbage can. There's an extra lid to a garbage can up in that room that was, I think, at one time a bathroom and that they were remodeling. And there's also a matching sort of container in the garage. Inside of that container found on the farm is a piece of yellow duct tape. That duct tape had blood. That was Bart Halderson's. On that tarp inside of that trash bin, there's more yellow tape. More yellow tape. And there's yellow duct tape found at the house. So analyst McMahon pieced these together microscopically to see if they were a match. And she looked at them and found that they were all one continuous piece of tape. That's the tape he wrapped around the tarp to seal up his dad's torso. That torso also had Bart and Krista's DNA on it and tested positive for blood. Analyst Matson looked at some various items from the farm as well. She looked at that same tarp and found a fingerprint from Chandler. Now remember, that tarp we have Chandler buying at Fleet Farm. It would have been bought and packaged with no fingerprints on it. Here we find it covered in blood with his fingerprint. She also looked at that tarp that was in that bin and looked at it for footwear impression analysis. Could she see some prints on it, and can we match those up to some shoes? Maybe that'll help us figure out who that is, who was on that tarp. She's able to match it up to Brooks 5 launch shoes. A pair of Brooks 5 launch shoes in a size 10.5 were found in the Halderson garage. Again, those are the same ones that have blood on them and that Chandler's wearing in that video. A second tarp was found in the barn. It is an older tarp. They tried to do footwear analysis on it, came back to a Ralph Polo shoe. We never found one of those. But again, that's an older tarp. We don't know if possibly it was before the homicides or after, or if there was a pair of shoes that were ditched somewhere. But that tarp, once again, is covered in blood that tests positive for both Bart and Krista. Now, you saw a picture of Bart working on that tarp. What you didn't see on that tarp was a bunch of blood stains, because they weren't there. This blood is from this crime. Chandler gets home from the farm at 8:54 in the evening, after going to the farm and later having dinner with Kat. But that night, he's not done. Early in the morning of the 6th, we see the fireplace burning more. Not as great as before, but some burning. We also see that garage light go on and off, on and off. I think it's a total of 7 times, Deputy Wilk. And that's throughout the night. And we know at 4:30 that morning, Chandler leaves and goes into Madison. We know he goes into Madison from his phone records. We don't know what he did there, but we do know it was a trip that started out in the dark. We know he didn't have a job. And we know Madison's surrounded by lakes. Use your common sense. Wednesday, July 7th. We know the Subaru departs at 9:36 and that Chandler goes to the farm. We know he goes to the farm from both his phone records, but also from this text exchange with Kat. Kat texts Chandler asking where he's going, and he replies, farm, but no one here, so leaving. We also know that out in the farm was found a Target bag that had been at Chandler's house. How do we know that? Because it has Kat's name on it from the pickup order of the stuff she brought over to Chandler's house, she testified about. That bag is full of bloody rags. We heard from Chris, those aren't from her house, and Catherine, that those aren't her rags. Chandler took a bag full of bloody rags, disposed of it at the farm, and a bag with Kat's name on it. And those tested positive for blood, but were not suitable for DNA testing. He comes back to his house after being at the farm, and he leaves and he goes and reports his parents missing at the police department. So he reports his parents missing. Later that evening, he has a couple visitors. There's close family friends, the Hilgendorfs, and there's 2 girls that are about the same age as the Halderson brothers, and they go over to try to comfort Chandler, because that's what Krista would want them to do, one of them testified. So that's what they were gonna do. They go over there, and through a series of events, Chandler starts giving them legal advice about police cooperation. You know, you don't have to turn your phone over to police. They don't have to image it. You can just take screenshots and text it to them. Your parents are allegedly missing. You just reported them to the police as missing, and you're encouraging people not to be fully cooperative with police? He then later has pizza that night with Mary Sesto and tells Mary Sesto, she starts saying, well, can't they just ping your parents' phones? Wouldn't that work? And he said, no, they can't ping a cell phone. She, disagrees with him. Yeah, you can. He looked her in the eye, she testified, and coldly said, no, they can't. She was nervous enough of Chandler at that point that she testified that she put herself between the exit door and Chandler. At that point, she knew something had happened. She just didn't have the evidence to back it up yet. Just her gut feeling. On July 8th, Chandler goes around the neighborhood and questions neighbors concerning video footage. In all fairness, his uncle did recommend that he do this, but his uncle also said it's to preserve that evidence. If you watch those videos and listen to that audio, when people and his neighbors say, yeah, well, I turned it over to the police yesterday, he doesn't say, okay, thank you. He starts asking him questions. Does your camera pick up the road? Does it pick up my house? Does it pick up my driveway? He's not trying to help the investigation. He's trying to figure out, are the police on to me yet?
Judy, do something with your nephew.
3 different stations. And as more and more squad cars arrive, he starts calling the police, asking, hey, what's up? Also that day, on July 8th, he does some Google searches.
What?
The timing of these searches is incredibly important, folks. Those searches happened at 9:44 and 9:45 a.m. Torso is not found until 3 p.m. Krista's legs are not found until a week later. And what is he Googling? Body found, Wisconsin. Women's body found, Wisconsin. Wisconsin dismembered body found. Dead body found, Wisconsin. I think it's interesting what he wasn't Googling. Jane Doe, John Doe in hospital in Wisconsin. Car crashes in northern Wisconsin. Crimes in White Lake, Wisconsin. Drownings on Sawyer Lake, where their cabin is. Or organizations that maybe can help start a manhunt. I think it's also worth noting he had 2 vehicles available, never even went looking for his parents. There's a reason. He knew where they were. He put them there. It's also worth noting that the analyst yesterday, Courtney Ripp, testified that she didn't have any Google searches before July 8th to even look at. So that either means that Chandler never Googled anything for the entire time period of those search warrants, or he cleared his history every day. On this day, he was arrested. He didn't have a chance to clear his history. So he's taken down to the station where he gives about an hour and a half, 2-hour interview, where he gives this same lie of this mystery couple of, taking lots of alcohol to the cabin, taking a large amount of cash, because, accountants love to keep large amounts of cash around. And at some point, Detective Hendrickson is like, we know you're lying. We know your parents are no longer here. Why don't you tell us the truth? And at that point, Chandler's arrested. So that's the evidence, folks. That's the pieces of the puzzle in this case. It's not a whodunit.
Oh, that's cool.
Cameras all around. We know that Bart and Krista went into that home and never came out, at least as whole people. That their bodies were found dismembered, discarded, and hidden throughout the southern half of Wisconsin. That's what the evidence shows. We have experts from DNA, fracture matching, trace, footwear, fire inspector. We have bones in the ash trap. Chandler Halderson killed his parents. But I think it's very important to point out that Bart and Krista Halderson are not a puzzle. It's a good metaphor. It's a helpful metaphor, perhaps, to look at evidence. But they are two people that were very much alive on June 30th of 2021. They are two people that deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. They were somebody's spouse, somebody's parents, somebody's brother, somebody's sister. They were loved by their neighbors, they had close friends, they had jobs. They were normal folks just trying to live a normal life. They don't even get to be buried next to each other. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm asking that you give justice to Krista and Bart Halderson, and that you treat them with the dignity and respect that their own son has never given them. Thank you.
Spike and Judy's got enough.
Does anybody need a break? Or can we go forward?
Actually, Judge, I'm going to ask for a 10-minute break.
Okay.
Thank you.
I could use a moment too. Ladies and gentlemen, we will break, mid-morning break actually, and we'll come back for the defense closing and further instructions and perhaps rebuttal arguments. So, Randy?
All rise for the jury.
Thank you. Please be seated. Just so you know, folks, Randy determined that it'd be easier to collect the notebooks at this point, and then once we know who the alternates are, he'll have to spend a moment sorting them out, but that way they're not in your way. Attorney Vera, would you please present the defense closing?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Taking you back 2 weeks ago, roughly, you were told that opening instructions, like closing arguments, are not evidence. But what it is a roadmap of how their case is going to go and how our case is going to go. So you have an idea, as you're hearing all this evidence, how this case is going to go from both sides. From the beginning, we told you that this case was about the homicides. I listened to Attorney Brown's opening again this morning as I was getting ready, and there were some things that he noted that I think are important. First off, towards the end of his opening, he apologized for some things. Essentially, he apologized for doing his job. He said it might be repetitive, it might be boring at times, but he needs to do it because he has a constitutional obligation to present their case, and they only have one time.
So you're going to badmouth the other attorneys? This is what you're going with.
So now it's my turn to apologize.
Oh.
I am going to apologize for doing my job. First, let me talk about my job. A lot of people think my job is to, quote unquote, get the defendant off on their charges, to object to every single question that's asked, to ask any question I possibly can of witnesses, to be loud, obnoxious, and make a scene so that I can try to get this person off of their charges. It's not. My job is to make sure that they do their job. My job is to make sure that if they're bringing charges on someone, they're doing it because they can do it beyond a reasonable doubt. They can prove those charges beyond a reasonable doubt. And people don't like when I say those words, beyond a reasonable doubt, because it almost feels like a cop-out. And if you think that it's a cop-out, well, then your issue is not with me. Your issue is not with Chandler. Your issue is with the US Constitution that says that without them, you don't have me. And without me, you don't have them. My job is to make sure that the state, with all of its powers. Look, they even have more tables than we do.
Well, this
But
is
they do
different.
their job.
Hey, Tricia.
And I'm going to do that job today.
Yeah, this is bizarre. I've never heard of closing like this
There's a
before.
couple things that I want to address
That should have been like
before
a
I go any further down
jury
that path.
selection thing.
The first thing I want to address is sort of the obvious. Chandler lies. He tells a lot of lies. Not only does he lie, but he goes to extreme lengths, if you will, to keep those lies going, or to perhaps cover up those lies. I guarantee you, every single person in this room has told a lie,
Yeah, you picked that job,
has
lady.
either covered up that lie, or has done something to keep that lie going. Maybe not now, maybe when you were a teenager. Go back to high school. I'm sure you lied at your parents all the time. You're not.
Yeah, but I didn't kill
20,
him.
so your lies are not
Not a
exaggerated
good argument.
and highlighted right now. But they are here. And the important part is that Chandler is not charged with lying to his girlfriend or to his parents. There's one charge that has to deal, one per parent, that has to deal with lying. Everything else is something that the state told you to try to feed you a theory, a motive, and to essentially taint your view on Chandler. So when we were going over jury selection, I asked you, how would you feel if you didn't testify? And a couple people said I wouldn't need to hear from him. A couple people said that they would treat him the same way they would do every witness. Bullshit. He lies, and they did a great job of making it known that he lies. If he testified, you were not going to believe anything he said.
No, she
It's a
didn't.
game day decision, and most of the times it is a game day decision. This never was. If you heard from him, were you even going to believe him? You weren't, and that's fine, because it doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, there's only one lie that really does matter, and that's the one that he said about his parents missing.
No, she didn't. No, she didn't. That's a great way to get the jury on your side. To tell them that what they told you was bullshit. Yeah, that's a great way to get the jury on your side, lady.
I'm going to make your life a little easier, and it's going to be a little unconventional.
Oh
There are
my
certain
God.
charges that I believe the state has met their burden, and they have proved it beyond a reasonable doubt. And again, from the beginning, first-degree intentional homicide is a serious charge. We've been here for the homicides. A piece of paper that is signed, a formal piece of paper that's signed by Chandler to the Dane County Sheriff's Office about a missing persons that clearly is not true. This is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And I want you to think about that when it comes to talking about these homicides. I also want you to think about another thing.
She got her Starbucks.
I apologize. But I want you to think about another thing. When Attorney Raymond did her closing, two phrases, if you will, really caught on. Several times she said, "We know X, Y, and Z happened. We know that this happened." Pay attention to the times where she said, "We don't know." We don't know. I can't tell you how she was killed. We don't know. Whatever. And it was always in the parts that had to do with the homicides. When I was in law school, I was told that the words "I don't know" should never come from that table. Because you should know. If you're charging people with crimes, you should know. So now I'm going to walk you through the evidence that I think that they skipped over that matters for me in proving that first-degree intentional homicide was not something that they met their burden on. I first want to talk about the cabin. There is a cabin. There's no disputing that. Bart and Krista went to the cabin at least 2 or 3 times a year, I think is what someone testified to. It's possible that they could have gone to the cabin that weekend. In fact, you don't even know what their weekend plans were. Friends testified. None of them said, oh, they were going to come over to watch fireworks with us. So no one knew what their plans were that weekend. The reason they're making a big deal about it is because that is some kind of premeditation to them. That is some kind of intent. Ooh, he was going to do something that day. He knew he was going to do something that day, so he was going to say something about going to the cabin. He's talking to his girlfriend days before, on the 30th, so a day before. There's a text message exchange between Kat and Chandler where Kat asks, we're not going to the cabin, right? And he says no. You're allowed to use your common sense. When you have conversations with significant others and you're texting, you're not going to get the full story because sometimes you do it in person. What we know from him and his girlfriend is that they chatted on Snapchat. They chatted everywhere they could. So you're not going to get the full story from text messages. But what you do know is that at some point, talks about going to this cabin as a family were happening. So this notion that the idea of going to the cabin was last minute because he needed to cover up these homicides that he was going to do is not true. Now, again with the lies. Certain lies mattered. Certain lies did not. What I want to clear up, and Attorney Raymond did a great job when she mentioned that we've seen this case multiple times. We've dealt with this case. We've talked to each other about this case. So sometimes we get things wrong. I'm going to clear up something that they got wrong. The evidence does not show that Bart and Krista knew about this SpaceX job. You heard from Kat's mother, Dulce, that she knew about it. You heard about Cress knew about it. Kat talked about it. Maybe another friend or a roommate talked about it, but you never heard anyone testify that Bart and Krista knew about this SpaceX job. You heard from Bart's brother, Brett. I do not believe he mentioned it at all. So that's not a lie on this house of cards that was crashing down that Bart and Krista knew about. You also didn't hear that they knew about
That's a small detail that doesn't matter.
Dive team, whatever you want to call it, lie with the City of
Another
Madison Police Department.
Detail that doesn't matter.
You heard it from his girlfriends, ex's girlfriends and Kat. You heard it from his friends. But you didn't hear it from people that knew Bart and Krista and said that they mentioned it. And even then, all of these lies, what does it matter?
It's motive.
So I want to talk about the 2 lies that the state really honed in on. And boy, did they do a great job talking about these lies and making it seem like it really was a big deal. Let's talk about MATC. First of all, yesterday, I think we heard from an official person from MATC that said, no record that he attended school during this time. Detective Shunk showed us transcripts. You saw all his grades. He did attend at some point. That was really all you needed. You did not need to have the email conversations. You did not need to have the text conversations. You didn't need any of that, but they provided it to you, even though it's not an element or a charge that they have to prove. During their opening, And throughout the case, they made a big deal about this email. It was an email between Bart and Krista. First of all, the email happened October 10th, 2020. The jig was up a long time ago. It didn't all of a sudden crash and burn on the 1st of July, 2021. And Bart knew. He was onto it. He says he sounds just like Chaz on the phone. Use your common sense. These email exchanges are from people with a .gmail.com address. Official school people using a .gmail.com address. Both Bart and Krista are college educated. You want to tell me that they honestly thought that this was legit?
No, that's why he
Or
killed
maybe they
them.
knew that their child was lying and they were just going to carry on the lie. Same with AmFam. And I use AmFam colloquially, but American Family Insurance. Again, there was a person that testified yesterday that Chandler never worked there, but you still had emails, you still had text messages, you still had this and that confirming that he lied, even though one person could have done that. And again, it's not an element that they needed to prove. It's not a charge that they needed to prove. They just wanted you to know that he's a liar.
They don't have to prove motive, but it's good when they
And
can.
what does it matter? Here's what you need to ask yourself. What does it matter? Because according to them, that's motive. That's the reason why he did what he did. This house of cards built of lies was crashing down, and he had nothing. He couldn't do anything, but he had to murder these people. Why? Why? You don't know why. You were never told that they were going to kick him out of the house. You were never told that they were going to disown him. You were never told anything about why it matters. If this is going to be motive, if this is the reason you're intentionally killing someone, it better matter. There better be consequences. Kids lie to their parents all the time. And you just don't know how this was going to affect Chandler. He's complaining to his girlfriend the morning of about everything being fucked up and crashing down. You do that. That's what significant others are for.
Did she
You
just
honestly think
drop
that
an
he's
F-bomb?
complaining about things crashing down and his mind is going straight to, well, now I'm just going to murder them. There was another motive that was mentioned very briefly, but it was mentioned, so I'll talk about it. When Mitchell testified, the very last question was about a life insurance policy. And I believe he said that the payout may have been about $1 million. And he acted confused. He didn't really know about it. It could very well be that the only reason he knows that number, that value, is because of things that are happening now. I don't doubt that kids know about parents having life insurance policies. I don't doubt that. But ask yourself this, does everyone know how much the policy is worth?
No, I didn't.
Probably not. Do you think you're going to get $1 million from your parents? Probably not. And there was no evidence that was provided to show that Chandler knew that there was a policy in place and he knew the value, knew enough of that value to do something very drastic to get that money. There was no evidence that he needed money. Yes, he didn't have a job, but nothing came out that he needed money. And I'm spending time talking about a motive because, as the judge said, they don't need to prove a motive. Motive does not mean intent, and I need you to understand that. Motive does not mean intent. The other important part that I want to focus on is this timeline. If you go back to the opening, the state said that from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. on the 1st, the killings occurred. Again, it's not evidence, but it is a roadmap, and it is important because that's how they're going to tailor their case throughout. Well, first of all, Krista didn't get home until after 5 o'clock, roughly around 5:12. They made a big deal about this MATC meeting. MATC with Chaz, MATC. You don't know if that was in person. You don't know what it's about other than MATC. You don't know if it was just a conversation that they were going to
Oh,
have.
please.
You don't know if it's a follow-up. You don't know anything about it other than some kind of MATC chat was going to happen between Bart and Chandler. And that was going to
I
happen at 3
think we
o'clock.
can extrapolate from all
I
the
don't know about you, but my
messages
meetings
what the
never run on
meeting was
time.
about. I don't think that's a stretch, lady.
The other important part with this timeline is what we heard yesterday from Bart's employer. We asked him about that spreadsheet that has these logins. And remember, the logins were in Eastern time. So what we said, what we were able to get out is that roughly from about 4:13, there was a login. What do we know about that login? We know that it's required, a password is required. We also know that, like a lot of dads, people keep their passwords in a place where they can remember them. We also know that the logins, that there was a certain amount of logins that you were able to do before you were booted out. We also know that that person tried these passwords, couldn't get in. So there's some leaps that you have to make in order for this theory or this timeline to make sense. The first leap you have to make is that Chandler knew that password. There's no evidence that he knew that. The second theory that you have to make is that while he's allegedly murdering his parents,
Yeah, you don't know
had
that
the
he didn't
wherewithal
know
to
it
go to
either.
this computer and put on YouTube or something to keep it going when there's no evidence that that even happened. There was a lot of evidence about cell phone data that were extracted, computer data, all of that, but nothing about Bart's laptop showing that there was YouTube or anything to keep that computer active, because it had to be active. It would shut down or it would log off after 20 minutes of inactivity. The other piece of evidence with this timeline is that you had that neighbor that during their closing, the state said that the neighbor smelled something around 8 to 9 p.m. No, they testified that it was around 7 o'clock that they started smelling something. What we do know is that roughly around 8, around 8:30-ish, maybe a little earlier, look at your notes, Chandler went to Quick Trip to buy some ice. So again, another leap that you're supposed to make is that while he's allegedly murdering his parents, he decides, I'm gonna start this fire, I'm gonna put some things in that fire, but wait, I have to go to Quick Trip. Use your common sense. That makes sense to absolutely no one. They don't get the benefit of the doubt that I get. So they can't say, well, we might have been wrong about the timeline. They don't get that. What you have is a medical examiner, 2 medical examiners that could not say the time of death. So really, truly, do you know what time these alleged homicides happened? You don't. You know that they happened that day based on other circumstantial evidence that you can put together, but you don't know the exact time. Let's talk about what else you do not know. You do not know what gun was used. They want to make a big deal about this gun. Let's talk about it. You heard from the medical examiner that there was at least 2 to 3 shots of a gun, period. That medical examiner was not able to tell you what kind of gun, wasn't even able to tell you if it was a high-powered rifle, just a gun. She also wasn't able to tell you which wound occurred first. So this contact wound, that could have been the last one. That could have been the first one. You don't know. This gun was not even located until October. These homicides occurred in July. Chandler apparently hid everything. He hid it so well that they didn't find it until October when the owner of that farm was cleaning out. If anything, Dane County deputies did a thorough investigation. They spent at least 3 hours in that barn. You want to tell me they couldn't find a gun, but they were able to find a tarp? What you know from the gun is that there's a bullet casing and a bullet fragment in this basement that match to this gun. You do not know when that casing was there. You don't even know if that bullet fragment and that casing happened at the same time. You don't know that this is the gun that was used on Bart. You don't know that.
So some random stranger went to that farm and left all that stuff there. Okay.
So whenever you don't know about something, you have to ask yourself, have they met their burden? Is this proof beyond a reasonable doubt? Because you do have examples of what proof beyond a reasonable doubt is. Those maps that we saw yesterday, tracking Chandler's every single move, matching up with where the bodies were found and at the time that they were found, that's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. A bloody tarp and some tools, that's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. But that doesn't mean that a homicide occurred. It means that something awful happened. And no one's disputing that. No one is saying that nothing happened to Bart and Krista.
What?
Something awful happened to these two people. And the very least you can say is that Chandler reacted. But you do not know what happened. And I know some of you have already made up your mind. I see it, and that's fine. Maybe you do think he murdered his parents. The question I have for you is, did the state meet their burden when it comes to first-degree intentional homicide? There are a lot of different homicides. First, second, reckless. They chose first-degree intentional homicide because they believed that they could prove that. I'm asking you that question.
That is not.
What have you been given that proves intent?
That they didn't pick that charge because they thought they could prove it, lady.
During closing, they said that the last time that there was any kind of search happened on the 8th. And they believed that he was just deleting his searches every day and he wasn't able to delete his searches on the 8th because he was arrested. Their search is on the 7th. And hey, guess what? There are times when I do not Google something. There are times when you all don't Google something. So he was smart enough to delete his Google history, but he's not smart enough to delete anything else. He's smart enough to do a very good job about cleaning and concealing these homicides, but man, was he just really bad when it came to everything else. You cannot have it both ways.
Oh no, he was pretty good.
You can't have someone that is so cold and calculated to clean everything up.
Because we don't know a lot.
Say to themselves, I'm going to leave one casing.
But we know enough.
You just can't have that with everything else that happened after these homicides. It's kind of laughable when you think about it.
Your clothing's laughable.
And you just don't have that with these homicides. Why? Why don't you have that? There was no evidence, there was no testimony at any point saying that Chandler had planned this out, and they would have brought it to you if they had it. There's no evidence at all that Chandler is a violent person. And I'm not saying that you need to be a violent person to commit homicides. You know that. But again, intent is something that means something. And there's just no evidence that's providing you with that level of proof beyond a reasonable doubt that you need for this first-degree intentional homicide. Do you know how Bart was killed?
He was shot
Exactly
in the
how he was
back.
killed.
He was shot in the
Do
back.
you know how Krista was killed?
No, but Bart was shot in the
Do
back.
you know if it was an awful accident? Do you know if it was intentional? Do you know if there was someone else involved? You don't. And that's a problem.
Not for me, it's not.
Now, for better or for worse, this case has gotten a lot of media attention, and unfortunately, I have to bring it up. You were asked every day whether or not you saw something on the news, whether you heard something on the news. And you were asked that for a reason. You guys have a really bad job coming up. It's difficult. I do not want your job. You have to go back and look at everything
I wouldn't want yours either.
and make sure that everything that you're discussing in that room actually came from evidence that you heard from that stand and not from the Google searches that you may or may not have done. I'm hoping you didn't, but I'm going to be realistic. Or the comment section on YouTube. And you're going to have to hold that person accountable, and you're going to have to hold that person accountable because that's your duty. You have another very serious duty that's going to be hard for each and every one of you to do. You're going to have to take your emotions out of the equation. There was another promise that was said during the state's opening. They promised you that they were not going to try to tug at your heartstrings and show you pictures that they didn't need to show you. When Mitchell testified, do you think he needed a giant blow-up picture of his parents next to him to be reminded what his parents looked like?
Oh, come on.
When Brett testified, do you think it was important for their case to ask him the last conversation he had with his brother? Oh, and it happened to be on his birthday? The birthday being July 1st? No. They didn't do that because they needed it for the case. They did it because they want you to think of your emotions. They want you to feel things. Because when you feel things, it's going to be harder for you to separate feelings from facts. And you're going to have to do that. Because you may feel bad. No one here feels great about what happened. And after you make your decision, no one's going to walk out of this courtroom feeling at ease, at peace, happy. But you're going to have to do that. And people are not going to like it, regardless of what the decision is. And you're going to have to hold people accountable for it. Now, I don't get to come back up. When I'm done, the state's going to come up and they're going to do their rebuttal. And they're going to say everything that I said is flawed some way, somehow, or that you shouldn't pay attention to it. And that's fine. That's their job. They have the burden. They have the last say. But when they're talking during their rebuttal, I want you to think of this. What if I told you that at any minute, someone's going to walk into that door, someone from the Dane County Deputy's Department is going to walk in and say, I found it. I found the video we were looking for. I know exactly what happened in that house on the 1st. It doesn't exist.
Yes.
What if it did?
Yes, 60 girl, this is a defense.
Are you going to be paying attention to, I'm going to assume it's Mr. Brown, but are you going to be paying attention to what Mr. Brown has to say during his rebuttal? Or are you going to be looking at that door hoping that someone walks in?
No,
if you're going to look at
paying
that door
attention
hoping
to their
that someone comes in,
rebuttal.
you have reasons to doubt.
What is this? That's the strangest closing ever.
There are plenty of reasons to doubt that a first-degree intentional homicide occurred. There are plenty of reasons to doubt. You may not like that. It may feel like a cop-out. It
Oh
may feel like
God.
I'm just doing something for the sake of coming up here and talking to you. I'm not. I'm doing my job. I'm making sure that they do their job. And I'm asking you to do your very difficult job of evaluating everything. And from day one,
Oh,
the
man.
issue has been the homicides. I want you to spend time on the homicides. Ask yourself the questions that you need to ask. I guarantee you that the 12 of you that are going to go back and deliberate are all going to have 12 different theories on what happened, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
I'm asking you to find
Yeah.
him not guilty of first-degree intentional homicide.
Didn't she say we don't know if it's a homicide? We do know it's a homicide. He was shot in the back. She didn't. She said that. I don't think she meant to say that.
Thank you, Attorney Vera.
She got into a rhythm of you don't know, and then
As
at
counsel
one point,
indicated, the state carrying the burden of proof has the opportunity for a rebuttal. In other words, the last word. And I believe Attorney Brown will provide that to you at this time.
she got into a rhythm of you don't know, and she actually said you don't know it was a homicide, and I don't think she meant to say that because we do know it's a homicide. Bart was shot in the back. You don't shoot yourself in the back. Oh my God. I'm glad I didn't go into law. I'm too thin-skinned to be a lawyer. All these critiques on the internet would drive me crazy. I would be in tears every day.
It's a lot of talk in the defense
Yay, the
closing and opening
Jonathan
about
Groff lookalike. I'm gonna
things I
miss
learned in law
him.
school or
He's so
going to
cute.
law school. And I think in the opening, I heard at one point, being on a jury is different than being a person. I don't know if any of that's true, but I'm done with law school and I do this for a living. I operate in a world of common sense and not fanciful thoughts of just this guy finding his dead parents and deciding no big deal, let's just cut them apart and hide them around the state. But who knows how they died? I live in that world. That's the world you should live into. Because being a juror is no different than being a person, unlike maybe what you were told earlier. You're told by the judge, although they figured out a way to say it in about 2 paragraphs, you use your common sense and experience in the roles of everyday life, or something along those lines. A bunch of lawyers got together and thought about it for 2 weeks and figured out a way to say, use your common sense. Miss Vera just stood up here and said, what if this was an awful accident? Bart Halderson was shot in the back twice. You do not fall down and shoot yourself in the back twice.
Thank
Bart
you.
Halderson and Krista Halderson had their heads chopped off, had their arms and legs removed. That was an awful accident. Think of for a second. You heard about the bones. You saw those marks on the bones, those attempts. Some of them 3, some of them 10, some of them 5. False starts is what the anthropologists call them. That is someone on their hands and knees, Chandler apparently, which was just saying, I guess we're admitting to that now. They lied and chopped him up and hit him around the state. On his hands and knees, some of them from the front to back, meaning probably could see the face of his mom and his dad as that saw moved back and forth, back and forth. And you just saw the bones, but what's before the bones? The skin, the blood, the muscle, the fat, the smell that they had to produce, the blood of his own parents.
That is Jonathan Groff. I love this man. That's who the lawyer reminds me of.
An awful accident. We heard, I go days without Googling things. I don't, maybe you do. But I bet you don't Google dismembered body found Wisconsin when you're crying on the local news about your missing parents. I bet you don't Google woman's dismembered body found. I bet you don't do legal research about some other guy who chopped up his family members and threw them in a river. Bet you don't do that. This process is common sense. Ms. Vera talked a lot about the lies. Chandler is a liar, and it seems like we all agree on that now. Lots of people lie. I can agree with Ms. Vera on that. But the question in this case isn't, who would do this? And maybe that's something that's gone through your mind here. Who would do this? Who would go through all this? Who would make up all these lies? Who would take it this far? All these fake people, the burner phone, the nonsense, the calls to his dad, the emails back and forth, the friends and family, the move to Florida. Who would do this? And you're going to leave this room. 6 of you are going to go home. 12 of you are going to go into a room and talk to each other. And you're never going to have an answer to that question. Because who would do this in the common sense meaning of it? Nobody does something like this. But that's not the role of a jury. You're answering a different question, which is who did this, not who would do this. Because for the life of you, I bet before you got that notice in the mail a couple months ago saying you had to come here, you would say nobody. You would have said nobody. Nobody would shoot their dad in the back twice, kill their mom, lay them on the ground in front of their family fireplace, take scissors and pruning shears, take a hacksaw, take a keyhole saw, and saw off their heads, arms, legs, burn them in the fireplace. Over 100 fragments of human bone found in that fireplace. You would say no one would do this. But you got your jury summons, and you ended up here.
How do you do
and
that?
You found out that someone did do it.
Ugh.
Chandler Halderson did it. So those lies are important. Because you at some level have to grasp how this man got to that point. As I said in the opening statement, the murders were just a small piece of the puzzle. None of the things that happened before, none of the things that happened after make any sense. You gotta have the murders to understand why he did that bizarre story for 7 days of his parents going missing with the unknown couple. And you can understand the murders if you understand what happened before with his bizarre actions of building up this life that wasn't real. Why were those lies important? They were important because that's all he had. We're here because of the deaths of Bart and Krista Halderson, and they are dead.
I was
There's
thinking
no doubt
the
about
same
that.
thing.
You have most decidedly concluded that at this point. You have seen their bodies. But on some level, whoever Chandler Halderson was died years ago as well. And what was left was this shell of a person who made this nonsense up, who built himself up to be a tech employee, rescue scuba diving guy, who was going to college. It was all he had. It was all he had. And that started to unravel. Maybe his parents suspected it. But you listened to Bart Halderson on that call just about a day before he was killed. That sound like someone to you who knew his son had been lying to him? Those text messages. I spoke to Omar Joe. I'm ready whenever you are. He didn't know what was going on until that moment. So when Bart Halderson finds out that this is a lie, to Chandler, whoever Chandler Halderson is, the whole world crumbles. Because if you weren't going to school, they sure weren't going to hire you at American Family Insurance. That couldn't have been real. There's no way you got a job at SpaceX. What else are you lying about? Where are you going all the time when you say you're training for this scuba diving team? Everything about him falls apart. He doesn't have any money. Remember when he texted his girlfriend he was going to the police? Hey, can I have $5 for a sandwich? He can't just leave. He can't move out. He can't get in the car and head west. He probably couldn't make it out of the state with the amount of money he had because he never had a job. He had two options. Own up to his lies, stand up, and finally tell the truth for once. Or like a coward, shoot your father in the back. And that's exactly what happened. It's exactly what happened. Miss Vera says, wow, we just got a showcase. Yeah, we got a bullet fragment. Just happens to have Bart Halderson's DNA on it. And you looked at it, just happens to appear to have blood all over it. And then text my mom, hey, pick up soda for me. Dad's phone's dead. She gets home. Whose blood spatters on the safe right there by the bullet fragment? Those little red dots, human blood. It's Krista Halderson. We don't know what happened. We know exactly what happened. Murders are not captured on video. That's not how this happens. That's how this works. Sure, in the grand scheme of things, there are some people who are stupid enough to walk up to a gas station, stand in front of the security camera, and shoot somebody. But that's not real life. That's not common sense. Chandler Halderson did this in the basement of his house. The blood is everywhere. The bullet's there. You heard from Mr. Lellerberry, who testified, he only found one, and the one he found was kind of rolled behind under that bench. He tried to clean up. Peroxide everywhere. He's having people bring him peroxide. Blood all over that fireplace stoop. Bone fragments in the ash trap. You know exactly what happened. You don't need a video. The lies are important because it's all Chandler Halderson had. And when they were exposed, he started coming up with this plan. And yeah, after the Omar Job text comes in on the 29th, he's having a conversation with his girlfriend. You heard Miss Vera actually read it, and that's fair. The day before, hey, are we going to the cabin? What's going on? They're talking about the cabin. He's starting to dabble with the idea of what he's doing. But then I think it was at 1:04 p.m., just about an hour and a half, 2 hours before he did it, he says they're going to the cabin this weekend. He made his final decision. Because at that moment, Chandler Halderson knew there was no way out. He couldn't get in the car and drive away. He couldn't make up another lie. He couldn't make up another email. He couldn't buy another burner phone. It was done. Everyone was going to see him for what he was. Just some liar. Some guy without a job, not going to school, who'd been lying to everyone for years. And he couldn't handle that. So he committed the ultimate act of betrayal against your parents. Perhaps against any human being, but especially your parents, the person who held you when you were a baby and cleaned up your cuts on your knee when you were learning to ride a bike, comforted you when you were crying. The ultimate act of betrayal. He shot his parents. And then he cut them up and he hid them. But the lies didn't even stop there. It was a new lie. No, that's the cabin. Now he's on the news. Now he's giving interviews. Given 2-3 more days, don't think for a second there wouldn't have been 2-3 more fake emails. Text messages from my mom. A whole new world. A whole new reality for Chandler that he got to live in. His checklist was right there. Finally, he was going to get a job. Obviously, mom and dad couldn't support him anymore. Maybe he was going to get some life insurance. Maybe he knew, maybe he didn't. But he certainly got to continue on his fake life. He got to keep his girlfriend. People continued to respect him. His friends probably continued to think that he was successful, important. The lies were rinsed and repeated, rinsed and repeated. And I promise I'm about done, and I'm the last person who talks. The judge is going to talk a little bit more. What he's going to say next is hard to hear in that he has to read off the verdict forms you're going to take back to the jury room with you. Verdict forms are the physical documents for each charge. There's a bunch of charges here. For each one, there's one that says guilty and not guilty, guilty and not guilty, guilty and not guilty. And he actually read them all, and it doesn't make a lot of sense, but he has to do it. But what Ms. Vera is asking you to do is to lie. It is the last lie of Chandler Halderson.
Ooh, good. Oh, that
His
was
lawyer
good.
stood up here and told you to lie for him. Not
That
to
was
do what
good.
you swore to do, which is to render a just and true verdict based on the evidence, to reconcile the evidence. If you can find any reasonable hypothesis consistent with the defendant's innocence, a reasonable hypothesis, that reasonable hypothesis that was just offered to you is that it was an accident. That's how they died. And then Chandler made what his attorney believes to be the reasonable decision to chop apart those bodies and hide them around the state. What you're being asked to do is to lie one last time. It is the experience that everyone in Chandler Halderson's life has had to deal with, and now it's yours. His girlfriend dealt with it. Sure, Bart and Krista dealt with it, finding out maybe on the last day of their lives. Mitchell is dealing with it. Brett is dealing with it. Their family friends. The Hilgendorfs. Their kids, Haley and Hannah, they've had to deal with it. Mary Sesto had to deal with it. Kevin Linsmeyer, the neighbor, had to deal with it. Then to the police. Deputy Seeley, Deputy Nelson, Deputy Shunk, Deputy Sims, Deputy Hendrickson, Deputy Collins-LaFleur. Everyone who has interacted with this man for years has had no other experience other than being lied to. And now it's you that's going to be lied to by his attorneys. Asking
Okay,
you.
I'm going to object now.
Oh! Oh, dang. She mad.
Thanks for your patience, folks. I want to clarify that, of course, within the instructions, as far as closing argument not being evidence, closing argument being opinions expressed by counsel for both the state and the defense to you about their view of the evidence and so forth. My understanding is the state was not meaning to suggest that counsel for the defense had lied or in any way was urging you to do anything other than uphold your oath and to follow the law as instructed in your deliberations. If you could continue.
Thank you. Those verdict forms you're going to fill out, every single one of them represents something that happened. And what we're asking you to do is to dig through that evidence, dig through your notes, dig through your memory of what happened. What happened here wasn't an accident. What happened here wasn't a mistake. What happened here wasn't innocence, lies, coincidences. Mr. Halderson's statement to the police that my mom has nosebleeds and my dad, he just scratches his psoriasis. It doesn't explain his blood on a bullet fragment. It doesn't explain all of their blood on the fireplace. It doesn't explain the Halderson's teeth in the ash trap. It doesn't explain their skull in the ash trap and placed on top of the fireplace. What I'm asking you to do is to look for the truth and not to negotiate. Not take the idea that, well, there's one piece of paper there where he signed a document and says he lied to the cops, and maybe that's good enough. These people were killed. This is a first-degree intentional homicide. This is a first-degree intentional homicide. You cannot shoot someone in the back. You cannot chop them up. You cannot scatter their remains and come to any other conclusion. And there is only one person who did those things here, and that is Chandler Halderson. And we're asking you to find him guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel.
Okay. I hate to do this because all we have left is the verdict, but I have a doctor's appointment in 15 minutes and I have to get Zoom and everything all set up for my doctor's appointment. I thought I had it set up, but I'm having tech issues as usual. So I need to do that. It should redirect you to the neighborhood killing trial. It might not. I don't know. But it's set up So if it doesn't redirect you, the link is ready. So go over there and wait for me. It should not be long, 15, 20 minutes, or don't, whatever. Whatever, Marty. So I will see you guys in about a half an hour, I guess. Half hour, 45 minutes at the most. But we are going to do that trial today. I'm not abandoning y'all. I will be there. I promise I will be there. So I will see you guys as soon as I can, and we will do the neighborhood killing trial. And thank you guys for coming out today. I was trying to put a post up. Robert Bardo is the next trial we're doing. He unalived Rebecca Schaefer, who was an upcoming actress. Do you guys remember Mork and Mindy? Pam Dauber that played Mindy on Mork and Mindy. After that show ended, she had another show. It was called My Sister Sam. And Sam was played by Rebecca Schaefer. I think Sam was the sister. I mean, the little sister. And Pam Dauber played the older sister. And it was a good show. It was getting great ratings. Rebecca Schaefer was becoming famous because of the show, and she was getting movie roles and stuff. And this guy was stalking her, and I think she did a movie where she was partially nude, or had a sex scene or something, and that like set him off. He'd been writing letters to her and stuff, and so her doorbell rang, and she was expecting a script to be delivered to her, and that's what she thought it was, and she opened the door and he shot her. So that's the next trial we're doing. So I will let you guys go, and I will see you later. Not too much later, but later. So be kind to people, love your family. Jesus loves you, and so do I. I appreciate you all. Please, I'm not abandoning you guys. Please don't abandon me. So I will see you guys later. Bye.